Welcome to Advanced Entertainment Law. I'm Cassie Willard, and today we're joined by Julie Milhelm, a former chair of the Entertainment, Art, and Sports Law section of the Florida Bar, who's been with her practice for over 2 decades. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us where entertainers typically go wrong and get themselves into a legal bind?
Well, that's as individual as the entertainers, but there are a few consistent areas where that happens. One of them would be a failure to get permission to do whatever kind of art that they're doing, especially in music. That might be permission to record a song, permission to use a sample, permission to use a product in a certain way. A lot of people have misconceptions about public domain, about fair use, all these exceptions to the rules that they think might apply to them, kind of extraordinarily unusual exceptions that they think apply. And then they invest a lot of time, energy, and creativity in creating something that now they're stuck with and may never have an avenue to be able to exploit because they didn't get the necessary permissions. And in most situations, those permissions are entirely discretionary with the people who own the works. So there's only very few situations where you can basically get a compulsory right to do something. So that's one area I see consistently. Another would be rushing. I have enormous numbers of clients who come and say this deal has to be done in the next few days, or my opportunity is going to go away, they're going to retract their offer if it's not done immediately. And that is always, to me, a red flag that something is terribly awry, because things tend to actually move like molasses in this industry. People talk like everything is so hot it has to happen now, and if you don't tie something up now, the opportunity is going to be lost. But most of the time, those turn out to be not the most legitimate of opportunities.
You had mentioned red flags during one of your answers. When it comes to red flags, what should artists look for when they're looking through a contract on their own?
This is very difficult because contract language can be very complicated, even though it might look uncomplicated. I mean, those of us who have litigated know that sometimes the placement of a comma can completely change the meaning of a sentence. So it's hard sometimes to interpret what exactly a contract means. I would say that maybe the better approach would be to say, what is it that this person has promised to do, and where in the contract does it say that? Because my experience has been that most of the time when people send a contract to me and they say they're going to do X, Y, Z, the contract does not say they're going to do X, Y, Z. So I think it's more about looking for what's not in there than what is in there, other than perhaps a transfer of rights. Anytime you see language that's going to transfer rights or transfer copyrights or vest a power of attorney with someone, then absolutely you need to have someone review that, because those are very dangerous areas.
Do you have any recommendations for artists or business people just starting out that budget-wise are having a tough time justifying investing in an attorney? Should they try and go it on their own, or are they places where they absolutely need to stop and get legal counsel to assist them?
There are things that they can do. There are some options. There's an enormous wealth of information available now with the internet. You need to check your source, because a lot of the information out there is bad, just like a lot of what you hear among your friends and your colleagues is bad advice, bad information. Even information sometimes that you hear from lawyers that do not practice in the entertainment industry is completely incorrect. I mean, just like I wouldn't give advice on admiralty law, or I wouldn't tell someone how to do their probate or tax their estate. People need to practice in what they know, and it's no different for lawyers. And on the internet, it's the same thing. There's huge sums of information, but it's not exactly always accurate. So you need to have a source that is reliable. There are countless books these days that you can buy that give great fundamental educations, kind of the basics to familiarize yourself with the terminology. There are volunteer lawyer for the arts programs. Florida has had them on and off. Steve Eisenberg in South Florida right now is working very hard to reconstitute that. Eric Eisenberg, there's 2 Steve Eisenbergs in South Florida. My county, Pinellas County, had the only one in the state for a long time, and due to funding closed down in October of '06, shamefully. And it was a great program that had a great advocate. But there are some volunteer lawyers for the arts programs. Some lawyers will work on contingency that opens a whole host of other issues and ethics issues, and but that's a possibility as well. If you're going to be signing anything, I certainly think it's time to get counsel. And it's one of those things where very typically you can pay now or you can pay later, and it's usually much more expensive if you have to pay later.
Do you have any tips for our students as far as how to find an entertainment attorney?
Oh gosh, word of mouth is probably the most reliable. Ask around. You can obviously use the internet, Google around, check people's credentials online, checking liner notes of acts that you like. You know, sometimes they thank their lawyers. But Googling around, and I know I'm not supposed to use that as a verb, bad trademark move, but using search engines to check around on people is a good resource next to word of mouth. Word of mouth really, I think, is referrals.
One of the things that we occasionally see students with an interest in is the field of management or agency, potentially, of working with artists or other talent to go ahead and get them placed in a career. How would you define a manager or an agent, and would you recommend a student or a recent graduate to try and tackle that role in the industry?
Gosh, well, if they're independently wealthy, they could launch out into management if they're just starting. The manager's job is basically to be a member of that family. There's a lot of babysitting to it. There's a lot of personal involvement. They really are like another mate in the group. It's a lot more than, you're really responsible. A colleague of ours once said that, you know, a good manager should wake up every morning thinking, what am I going to do today to make my act happen and to give my act the profile that it needs. The manager oversees all the other third parties that are brought in, agents, publicists, choreographers, whatever the case may be. The manager should be guiding that. It's the manager's job to help completely create the persona of that act. Who do you want to be? How do you want to portray yourself? Be sure that you're getting in with the right, the good fit. It's really all about being sure that things are a good fit, whether that's the venues you play, that's the people that you work with, but people that are on the same page as your act and are not going to work against the flow of the act. And it really is, it's kind of almost a parental and a business role. It's a lot of work. Agents, much more impersonal relationship. You're just out there trying to book a gig. Most agents are not really that concerned whether it's a good fit, but they should be, because if it doesn't work out, you know, the venue's not likely to use the agent again. I don't see as much industry and agency as we used to. The other thing is you have to have a license in Florida to be a booking agent if you're booking more than one act. So there's a bonding process and an application process. It requires experience. So yeah, that's a big commitment. You have to be willing to make that financial commitment in order to be licensed in Florida to be an agent.
Lots of great details and information. What could you give our students as far as quashing some of the common misconceptions about how the entertainment industry really works?
It sounds totally cliche to say this, but I'm told it still needs to be said. Would be that it's, you know, glamour and wealth and all that kind of thing. There are levels at which it is that when you're in those ranks, but it's a very slim portion of the industry. People used to always, bands, acts would just think the whole thing was about getting the record deal and the enormous amount of work and investment in getting the record deal, and then they would think it was coasting from there. And actually getting the record deal is the easiest part of that process, because once you have that record deal, trying to get a label to support it, to promote it, to give it priority, to invest in it, all those kind of things are just a daily struggle for a manager, largely to tackle, and a lot of it dies there. I can't even count the number of bands either I've known or have had as clients that have gotten the big deal and then died on the vine. Some of that is the turnover at the labels. You know, the new A&R person comes in, the old A&R person goes out, the new A&R person has their own pet projects, they don't want to make the old A&R guy look good. and so that gets pushed under the rug, whatever that older stuff was.
Let us know, what would be your top 5 pieces of advice for somebody just starting out in the entertainment industry?
Be careful about who you deal with. You can find yourself in a commitment even if you haven't signed a contract. So when you work with people, you want to have something in writing that establishes the boundaries for what you're doing, because even if you don't sign something, you can still find yourself obligated to somebody. I would suggest that you become an expert at digging around for information on people. Know how to use the internet, use databases, use resources. People will tell you that they've accomplished all kinds of things, but the internet these days can be very telling about what people have really done and not. Along those lines, you network, know as many people as you can and find out who the people are you can trust, so that when something comes along, an opportunity, a person who wants to work with you, you have someone you can go to and say, what do you know about this person? What do you know about their history? What do you know about these projects they say they've worked on? Because that's invaluable. It will pay off in spades to be able to have somebody that you can go to like that and get that information. I say be very careful about using other people's money. There's a whole host of legal problems and issues that come along with that, not to mention potential litigation. So anytime you're using other people's money, you certainly want to have a good counsel when you do that. And realize when you're negotiating contracts to be businesslike about it, because yes, it's about relationships, but the fact is that 2 years from now, the person that you enter this contract with may not be the person on the other side. That contract may be sold, that person may go into bankruptcy, the contract may be, the business may be assigned to someone else. And you might find yourself opposite someone who isn't who you had the relationship with and who you relied on when you entered the agreement. So you want to be sure that the agreement has everything in it that reflects what your expectations are.
Thank you so much, Julie, for taking time out of your day to meet with our students. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today.